Hi there folks, my name is Harvey Mosteller. People at work call me Harvey Mozzarella, so I kind of like that. Let's go with Harvey Mozzarella. We're going to look at some bluegrass guitar basics here. This is going to be a real low-tech video. Just me, an iPhone, and this acoustic guitar. So let's talk a little bit about what bluegrass is first, and then we'll go into some rhythm guitar stuff and then some soloing ideas. So bluegrass is it's a combination of blues, Appalachian, Celtic, and old-timey music. It's just really like kind of a mixture of all those things, and it combines to make its own unique, very obvious type of sound. So of the bluegrass style, there's basically like three different areas or three different layers to the onion. So the first one would be like religious hymns. The second one would be secular vocal tunes, stuff like, you know, Bill Monroe, Ralph Stanley, Jimmy Martin, Tony Rice, Larry Sparks in some cases, stuff like that. You know, Sunny Side of the Mountain, Blue Moon in Kentucky, those sorts of things. And then the third layer of the onion would be fiddle tunes, and of that that subsection of fiddle tunes, you have American fiddle tunes and Celtic fiddle tunes. But in bluegrass, we just basically call them fiddle tunes. So like that opening little piece there I did was Red-Haired Boy. The Celtic version, they call it Little Beggar Man sometimes, but it's the same melody. We just traveled across the Atlantic and landed here. So you have religious hymns, you have vocal tunes, and then you have the fiddle tunes. And like what you would play on the guitar is going to be largely dependent on what type of tune we're playing. So an example of, I'll give you a few examples of fiddle tunes. So like the one I played there, Red-Haired Boy, that's a really popular one, Salt Creek. That's a really popular one. Blackberry Blossom, Whiskey Before Breakfast, or Whiskey for Breakfast, depending on who you ask. St. Anne's Reel, Temperance Reel, Billy and the Low Ground, stuff like that. So all those are examples of fiddle tunes that have been adapted for bluegrass. And depending on what part of the country you're in, you know, it might be more likely that one would come up in a jam than in another part of the country. In certain places, some of those fiddle tunes are favored, and in other places, other fiddle tunes and instrumental jam tunes are favored. So the cool thing about bluegrass is if you know a number of these standard tunes, both the vocal tunes, religious and secular, and the fiddle tunes, you can go to about anywhere in the country where there's a bluegrass jam, and people will call these tunes, and these are tunes that a lot of times you will have worked out in advance. So you'll have your breaks and your ideas and you know, your vocal parts in some cases arranged for that tune, and then you can collaborate with those people just on the fly like that. And that's really the cool thing about bluegrass. It's a lot like jazz in that way. A lot of bluegrass gigs are just people that are getting together and they haven't played for years or months even, and since they know these songs in common, it's not too much of a stretch for them to do a gig without having done a lot of you know, preparation other than their own individual preparation and practice. So with that said, let's look at some guitar stuff. So basically there's two things you're going to be doing. One is playing rhythm or soloing. So let's start with the more common thing, which is rhythm playing. So a lot of people ignore the rhythm playing, but what you got to understand is you're playing rhythm like 95% of the time. So a good rhythm guitar player in the context of a bluegrass ensemble can really change the dynamic of the thing, and can really actually help with the timing quite a bit, because you get into some timing issues sometimes when you have banjo players trying to push a tune and you got a bass player trying to keep it steady. As a guitar player, you can help quite a bit with that, or you can hurt it too. I mean, there's a lot of guitar players that go the other way, and really, it's not a good thing. So, anyway, let's look at some rhythm basics. So, probably the most distinguishable thing about bluegrass is this Lester Flatt lick. You hear that in almost every bluegrass tune since the dawn of time. So that's just a little improv on a basic rhythm type pattern. So let's look at that Lester Flatt lick. And there's a bunch of different ways that people do that, but the most common would be something like this. So that's just a G note, open A, hammer on from B flat to B. Then we're going to do the open fourth string, and then we do a pull off from the E note at the second fret to the open fourth string. So that's the Lester Flatt lick. And then you hear, like I said, you'll hear all different types of variations. Like if you're playing around a D chord, you might hear. That's just the same thing, except we're starting on the fourth string and we're doing it in D instead of G. So we do the fourth string open, hammer from 1 to 2 on the E string, open fifth string, pull off on the fifth string, 2 to O, and then open fourth string. So I'm in between chords in bluegrass a lot of times. There will be sort of like a walking bass type of thing. Now, in regards to that, it's a good thing to keep in mind the people that you're playing with and how you fit in to the scheme of that thing. So like me, I'm just sitting here playing by myself, so I'm being pretty busy with, like if I go from a G to a C, I might do something like that. But if I've got a bass player that's already doing that stuff, and then I'm doing the fancy, walking bass lines and stuff like that, then really what it does is it just muddies things up quite a bit. So you got to keep in mind, okay, who is it that I'm playing with, and what parts are being covered by the other musicians in the ensemble, and then what parts can I add, or in some cases, what parts can I not add that's going to make the whole thing sound better. So, for instance, I play with a mandolin player, a guy named John Gates, quite a bit, and we've played together for years. And we've got this sort of unspoken thing, like when we're playing a tune, if he's getting busy on the fills and stuff, like say during a verse that's sung or something, and he's getting jazzy with the fills and all that stuff, then I lay back, because the last thing I want to do is be playing licks on top of his licks, and then it just sounds like everybody's doing, a free jazz version of Freebird or something, and it starts to stink really quick. So the best thing you can do when you're playing rhythm is, well, A, keep good time, and B, listen to what the other guys are doing and try not to step on their toes. I think that's really important. So we looked at the Lester Flatt lick. Let's take it back to something simpler. So the basic bluegrass strumming type of rhythm would be something like this. That's the bluegrass rhythm in its simplest form. So let's look at what I'm doing there. So we have, I'm just playing a G chord. Then start out with a bass note, bass strum on the G note there. And then strum the higher strings, 1st through 4th string. Okay, and then I'm alternating. So I started out on the G note, then the strum, and then I'm going to play the D note, which is the 5th of the G chord. You know, to make a G chord, we have the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the G major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're alternating between the 1 and the 5. Okay, so after I do that D note there, I'm going to do an up strum, a down strum, and an up strum. So what we have is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now if I want to really make it sound like bluegrass, what I got to do is I've got to accent that 2 and 4. So if I play it straight ahead without the accent, it would sound like this. Sounds very sterile. And listen to what happens when I accent it. See how such a small difference can make a huge difference in the feel of what we're playing. And that's what I mean when I say, like, watching your rhythm is important, because if you miss that, then everything you play is going to sound sterile. That is clearly inferior to this. It's a night and day difference, but it's something as simple as an accent. As far as like the fills and stuff that I'm doing there, that's mostly improvised. What I would recommend there is spend some time playing along with CDs or streaming services or records or whatever it is you have. The only bad thing about that is especially when you get into the older recorded stuff, they didn't have, a lot of times they weren't tuned to A440 or whatever because they weren't using tuners, so they were just kind of tuning together and going. And then a lot of times, in addition to that, you know, they recorded on tape, and if the engineer or the producer decided, hey, I want this to be a little faster or a little slower, then they would just simply speed up or slow down the tape. But unfortunately, that's going to change the pitch. So if they were at A440 before, they won't be now. So a lot of times when you're playing along with recordings, you got to tune the recording, and it's not as simple as just taking out your tuner and tuning up to whatever 440 is. So a lot of times what you'll have to do is, if the song is, say, in the key of D, then you'll play your open D string, start your recording, and just listen to the recording and try to get that D string basically in tune with what you're hearing. Okay, and then once you do that, you'll tune the rest of the guitar off that string. Now, with a lot of modern tuners, another thing you can do is you can calibrate your tuner. So you can retune that D note or whatever it is, G string if the song's in G, or A string if the song's in A, etc. And you can get that one dialed in. And then you can sit there and play with your tuner, and you can calibrate your tuner to that one note. So a lot of times you hit the calibrate button, and then your tuner will recalibrate to A432 or A437 or whatever that tuning is. And then it's just as simple as using your tuner in the way that you normally would. Now, if you want to do it like the old timers, then just do it all by ear. And that's not hard either, but it's got to be something that you get used to doing, because you want to be used to playing along the recordings in tune. Don't take the lazy route and say, oh, I'm going to play with it a little bit out. That messes your ears up. That decalibrates your ears. So we definitely don't want to do that. So get tuned along with the recording, and then the second thing you got to do is you got to make sure that the volume level of the recording is sort of commensurate with the volume level of your guitar. So if you're using a Bluetooth speaker or something like that, an acoustic guitar can be pretty loud. So you want to make sure that the volume level is something that you can hear, or get the Bluetooth speaker close enough to your ear that it sounds pretty much even with the volume of your guitar. So practice along with those recordings. Practice playing rhythm, and practice doing different things with your rhythm. Not every bluegrass song is as simple as what I was saying before with it. A lot of times you have swing type rhythms, That's more of like a boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck. Let's take a quick look at that. So a lot of times when we're doing that sort of thing, more of a swing type of sound, what we want to do is mainly focus on closed chord voicings. So not a lot of open strings like we were doing before. Instead we would use maybe bar chords, or like the 3-note, like Django type voicings. So let's look at a couple of those. So that first one I did there was G7. So what that is that's low G note, and then we mute the 5th string. Then we play F note, which is our dominant 7th, and then we play our B, which is our 3rd. So we have our root, our 7th, and our 3rd. So that gives us a G7 type of sound. So all I'm doing there is I'm playing the G, and then I'm doing a punctuated strum, and then you let off the pressure of the notes in your left hand. Because if we don't let off that pressure, it's going to sound like this. We don't want that, we want this. Boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck. Another thing you'll hear is waltz time. So an example of that would be something like that's a little bit of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain by Willie Nelson, which is technically not bluegrass, I know that. But that was the first thing that came to mind. Another example would be like Knoxville Girl. That's like a faster waltz time type of thing, usually played in G or A. So let's take a look at the waltz thing there, and let's look at some of the rhythmic ideas we can do along with that. So that Lester Flatt lick, we kind of have to change the timing of that a little bit to accommodate this 3/4 time signature. So that's what I did there. So that's 1, 2, then triplet, and then we'd be on the 1 of the next measure. 1, 2, triplet, 1, 2. So when we do that last note, that open G, that's the 1 of the next measure of 3/4. So that 3/4 kind of changes the feel of things quite a bit. So we're kind of going over this fast. I mean, the presumption with this video is that you should already know some of the basics, some chords and things of that nature. This is just an overview. We're going wide, not deep. So moving right along, let's move out of rhythm. I said I was going to talk a little bit about lead playing and some concepts with that. So let's do that. So that Lester Flatt lick we looked at before, you know, you might have noticed that's kind of traces along the lines of the E blues scale, but it's sort of a major mode of that scale. So instead of starting on E, we're starting on G. So if we take that same sort of scale concept, we can come up with some other ideas that give us kind of a bluegrass sound. So say we're playing over G, I'm going to just improv, pull some stuff out of my butt based off of that G scale. But that in mind, let me say this. A lot of players think that you can just take a scale and you can sort of play up and down that scale, and as long as you're staying within that scale, and I used to think this when I started out playing rock, as long as you're within that scale, then everything's good to go. In bluegrass, it doesn't really work that way. It doesn't really work that way in jazz. It doesn't work that way in bluegrass. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So what really makes bluegrass sound like bluegrass is, for lack of a better way to put it, it's hitting chord tones in the right places. So there's really no easy way to explain this. It's kind of like a feel thing, and you get a feel for it the longer you do it. And the more tunes you learn, and the more solos you learn, and the more licks you learn, and the more ideas you come up with, and the more time you practice playing along with recordings and with recorded chord progressions and stuff like that, you will get an instinctual feel for when it is that you should be on a chord tone during your improvisation. So let's take a real simple example. This isn't really going to illuminate it very well, maybe not even at all, but I'm going to do the best I can. So say we have a chord progression that let's take Monroe's hornpipe, and the B section of that is something like, the chords would be G, C, D, G, G, C, D, G. D, G. So something something that you could play to that, like the melody, I think, is something like. So this is the simplest way that I can think of to explain this. So the chords again were G, C, D, G. So this melody traces right alongside those chords. So it's like, and then it's the C chord, we start on the C note. Then the D chord, the melody starts on the D note. And then G. Let's look at another way we could play that. We could chromaticize that a little bit. So instead of doing G, A, B, D, we could go G, A, B flat, B. So that's just an improv based around kind of starting, you know, the one of, or, well, let's just say the downbeat of each chord change on that tonic note of the chord. Now that's a really basic example. A lot of times in other instances we might want to be on the third or the fifth of the chord, depending on what the melody is on that particular tune. But a lot of times on those downbeats, we want to find ourselves on a chord tone. And that's really important in bluegrass. The voice leading or going from chord to chord and making sure that our soloing concepts are based off of the chord that we're playing over. So, you know, knowing your scales and all that stuff is going to be useful, but having sort of an instinctual understanding of where the chord progression is, and knowing that if, you know, the bass player's playing that G note or the mandolin player's chopping a G chord or whatever, you want to be playing a melodic idea that's consonant with that particular chord. So you always got to know where you are in the progression. It's not as easy as, like, a lot of times in blues tunes and stuff, you can just play the blues scale and, you know, just, you know, musically kind of ice skate across those scale tones, and you can find something that sounds consonant with the chord progression because the pentatonic and the blues scale are pretty consonant with the 1, 4, and 5 chord no matter what you do. But it's just not that simple in bluegrass. So that Monroe's hornpipe is an example of that. Being on the chord tones at the appropriate time. So that's that melody in a nutshell. So let's take another chord progression. Let me think here. Actually, let's do something faster. I'm rethinking that. So, Rolling My Sweet Baby Down, that's a good example. So, I'm going to badly sing this. Rolling my sweet baby's arms, rolling in my sweet baby's arms, all the way around the shack till the mail train comes back. So that first time I kept that pretty basic, sort of based off of the melody, which is something like my sweet baby's arms, my sweet baby's arms, wanna lay around the shack till the mail train comes back, rolling in my sweet baby's arms. It's always good when you're learning a vocal tune like that is to try to figure out the basic melody on the guitar. So sing the tune, try to figure out where the notes on the guitar, and then those melody notes are going to give you your targets for your soloing. So so let's take just the first opening lines, rolling in my sweet baby's arm. So that's the basic melody in its most simplest form. So how can we kind of dress that up? So there's one idea. There's another way we could do that. So instead of just playing, we can kind of slide up, and then we can do, a major third there. So that's just an improv based off of that. And I'm not going to go through that note for note. That's just, I'm trying to illustrate a concept here. So the chord progression to that is pretty simple. You probably figured it out. It's G, D, G, C, D, rolling my sweet baby's arm, rolling my sweet baby's arm, wanna lay around the shack till the mail train comes back, and rolling my sweet baby's arm. So let me play that one more time, and I want you to play along here and see what you come up with. So the first thing to keep in mind is the chord progression. You got to listen to it. You got to know when it's going to change, when it's going to go to that 5 chord, for instance, that first chord change. And then the end of it where we go G, C, D, 1, 4, 5, and then back to G. So 1, 2, 3, 4. D, C, D. One more time, then play solo. some basic ideas. Okay, so that's playing over, you know, obviously like a vocal tune, a secular vocal tune. Now, when you get into playing the fiddle tunes, whether we're talking American or the Celtic fiddle tunes, and there's a lot of overlap between those two because most American fiddle tunes are just Celtic fiddle tunes that have been repackaged. So when you learn to play one of those fiddle tunes, like some of the examples I listed earlier, like Whiskey for Breakfast, you're going to learn that melody. You know, you will know the exact melody. So it's, in a certain sense, it's easier to solo on those tunes than it is on the vocal tunes, because the vocal tunes, you got to figure out the vocal melody. So if you learn Whiskey for Breakfast, you'll know the melody. So you'll know, you know, like, okay, on that first measure, you'll know exactly what to play, and then, you know, the second measure, you know, that kind of gives you your target notes right there as you learn that melody. So you can take that basic melody and then you can dress it up in whatever ways you want to. So you can change little things or you can change big things. So like, for instance, that opening, first time I played it, I did it up here. So all I'm doing is I'm using natural harmonics there, and I'm letting them ring with the melody notes. Exact melody, except I'm just kind of dressing it up a little bit. One thing that you see a lot of intermediate players doing, and advanced players too, is they'll play the basic melody to a fiddle tune, and then at the end of that 8 measures, the 8 measure pattern that they're playing, most of these have 8 measure A sections and 8 measure B sections. At the end of that A or B section, a lot of times they'll play a fancy tag lick. So let me think of an example here. So Salt Creek is a popular one. Normally guitar players play that out of the G position. You know, so something like that. That last little thing I call a tag lick, because that wraps up or it tags a section. So let's look at some different ways. I'm just going to kind of pull some stuff out of my butt here. So we're going to take Salt Creek, and I'm going to throw some different tag licks on the end of that A section melody. So I'll just do it a few times through. Worse and worse as I went along there. But that's the fun thing about this, is you're gonna get to a point where you're just gonna start throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. One of the ones I did in there was like a tag lick that I've used for years. I like that because that connects to the 7th position. Position scale. Plus you've got those notes ringing together, almost like a piano sustain pedal type of effect. And then I did one that was kind of like a generic Tony Rice type of thing. Not that Tony Rice is generic, it's just my generic version of it. Tony Rice was famous for getting that dirty dominant seventh over the one chord. It's a very Ricean, for lack of a better term, type of tonality. So that's the A section. Let's look at the B section. So the B section of Salt Creek is something like. So kind of ended it two different ways. Let's do that again, and this time I'm going to put that high. I'm going to end it with that tag lick. Hopefully you jammed along to the melody on that part. I reckon I probably should have said that first. But yeah, so that's an example of how you can take a fiddle tune or an instrumental bluegrass tune and kind of spruce it up with some different tag licks. That's one thing you can do. That's not by any means, you know, all inclusive. You can do a lot of things other than that. But then again, it just takes experimentation. So going back to what we were talking about earlier with the, you know, with the vocal tune improv, it's always important to know where the harmony is. And by the harmony, I don't mean like a vocal harmony where you're singing thirds or whatever. I mean the chordal backup, the chordal structure underneath. So let's take Blackberry Blossom as an example, because that's the first one that came to my mind. So the chord progression of Blackberry Blossom, most people know this, but if you don't, it's going to be G, D, C, G, C, G, A, D, G, D, C, G, C, G, D, G. And it's usually played kind of boom chuck like. Or you could play it like this. Either way, if you have a mandolin player that's already chucking, then maybe you'll want to play like a fuller type of traditional guitar strum type of thing, or depending on the context. So anyway, back to the point. The point I was trying to make is, so we know that chord progression, right? We're just going to say for the sake of argument, we know that chord progression. So we could take that, and so we got G, D, C, G. G, D, C, G. Like if you know your chord inversions across the neck, so like you know that there's more than just this D chord, right? We've got tons of other options for where we could play D triads or D chords at. And we know that there's tons of other places where we could play a C chord, C triad, C inversion. So now we can take those and we can outline the chord progression just with different inversions of the chord. This is a simple way to come up with a new improv idea. So for instance, Blackberry Blossom. So we have G, D, C, G, C, G, A, D, D, or G, D, C, G, C, G, D, G. That's just a really generic way to do that, but take those concepts and work with those and try to come up with new melodic ideas based off of not only the melody that you learn for the tune, but also the harmonic background of the tune, and you will come up with some cool stuff. But it's easier said than done. You know, you're gonna have to sit there and you're gonna have to work it out. One of the things that I like to do more lately is I'll take a song that I know and I'll just try to play it slower and try to do something new that I haven't done before based off of that melody and that harmony. And I also like to take songs that I know and try to learn them in different fingering positions and keys. So like, for instance, St. Anne's Reel. You know, that's out of a C position. You can, I like to play it out of D. So take these tunes and learn them out of different fingering positions, scale positions, and patterns. That's a real good way to learn your neck. Like earlier I played that Salt Creek. I played it in two positions already in this video. I played it out of open A. And I played it out of a G position. So that's one thing that you can do. Also take these melodies and try to learn them in higher and lower octaves. So first one that comes to mind is Temperance Reel. You guys have probably heard Tony do that. Try to play it in a lower octave. Recently, my buddy Mike showed me this song called The Girl I Left Behind Me. How's it go? So I just took it and learned it an octave down. different fingering patterns, stuff like that. That's all going to give you melodic ideas that you can use when you're trying to improvise. I should probably say improvise in air quotes, because it's improvising, but it's not. It's not like jazz improvising where you're just going completely off the rails and in outer space or whatever. In bluegrass improvising, it's a little more structured than that. You got to be in the pocket with the melody and the chord progression of the song pretty close, and it doesn't leave room for a lot of space age jazz type of improv or anything like that. I mean, you got to be in the ballpark of what it is you're playing along with and what you're playing over. And the only way that you really get there, it's like lifting weights or anything else. The only way you get to Dorian Yates level of buff is you got to put the time in. No scale, no metronome exercise, none of that stuff by itself is going to do it. It takes time behind the guitar, and then in addition to that, there's varying levels of natural talent that people have or struggle with. I was never very naturally talented, so I feel like maybe it probably takes me a little more time to pick things up, and that's okay. That could be you too. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to put in the extra elbow grease. A lot of that, like I said, is just playing along with recordings, and then getting yourself to jams. That's another important thing. I should probably talk about that a little bit. Pretty much every town in the U.S. is, well, I should say every major metropolitan area anyway, has got a bluegrass jam somewhere. Almost without exception. No matter where I've been in the country, I've never been too far away from finding a bluegrass jam. All you got to do is you got to go to some music stores and stuff like that. You got to talk to some people. You got to find somebody that's picking there, and you got to get tuned into the community. Ask that individual, hey, where's the jams going to be? And then you show up and you take your little collection of fiddle tunes. You might only know 5 or 10, but that's fine. You go to that jam and you call those tunes, and you try to, on the rest of the tunes you don't know, you just try to tread water and you try to play along, and that's how you will learn a whole treasure trove of bluegrass tunes that will serve you for the rest of your life. And then the ones you can kind of feature yourself. You can call those tunes, and you can kick them off and stuff like that. And you'll get some practice playing those. And you'll notice that when you're actually playing with people, it's a totally different animal than when you're playing with the recording. When you're playing with people, things come up. People do things that you don't expect. You might have some crazy dobro player that's just doing some bizarre stuff you've never seen before, and then you might have to change your playing to accommodate. He might be playing real busy, and then all those Django licks or whatever it is that you thought would be super cool, all of a sudden, if you're playing along with that guy and you guys are both going off at the same time, it's going to sound pretty crappy. So you gotta take each playing situation as it comes and sort of ask yourself. I mean, not in words, but ask yourself, subconsciously, what is it that I can do to add? Or maybe you would ask yourself expressly. Maybe you'll have a mental dialogue that says, what should I be doing here? Probably, I don't think of things in that way. I just try to envision, what sounds best, somewhere in the recesses of my brain. I try to figure that out. But maybe you're more of a large language model person, and you gotta think about it and express, terms. What do I do here? What's my strategy? Where am I going with this? What can I add? What can I not do? You won't get that so much playing along with a recording that you've already played along with 5 times before, because you know where that's going. But when you get out with people in the real world and you're playing real bluegrass, they're going to throw some curveballs at you, and you got to be ready to run with the ball, especially when you're playing in that circle and it comes around and it's your time, you know, to play a break or whatever. You either got to play a break or you got to nod and pass to the next guy. So be ready for those things. So anyway, let's summarize what we talked about. So bluegrass music, there's three types. There's the religious and the secular vocal, and then you have the fiddle tunes. We talked a little bit about rhythm guitar basics and accenting the 2 and 4. We talked about the Lester Flatt lick. So we looked at some different variations of that, and we talked about how to play tastefully when it comes to walking bass lines and connecting chords. We talked about the difference between soloing over a vocal tune, you know, ironing out the vocal melody, and we talked about playing fiddle tunes and some strategies to come up with some novel soloing concepts for those types of tunes. I don't know. I feel like I really hit a lot with this, and I don't think we went too deep into anything. But hopefully somebody out there will get something out of this, and hopefully you'll share with a friend. I don't post too many of these videos anymore. I just kind of do this to help people, because I found a lot of things on YouTube that helped me as I've been learning to play. And I never monetized this station. I know I've got a few subscribers now, but it's not about making money. I just want to help people in their guitar journey in the same way that people have helped me. So hopefully you'll share this with a friend. Hit the like button. That helps other people to see it. The more people that'll like it, the more people that it'll be in the algorithm to pop up for other players that might see and might get some use out of this. And if you know anybody like that, I'm not real good at marketing this channel, but you can help me through word of mouth. Spread the gospel of Harvey Mozzarella. And hopefully this helps. I'll see you next time. Bye.